fintech has been a theme of the day. It seems to be one of the most popular areas for e-unicorns here. But you have a very interesting background with your founders in that you've known them for a very long time. How did you first meet your co-founder, and what was your first professional job together?
So me and Nicholas actually worked at Burger King, which was a great place to get to know each other because I don't know how many's worked there, but like I was the broiler. That's the guy who takes the meat from the refrigerator and puts it in the grill. And he was the steamer. That's the guy who takes it off and puts it between the buns.
Right.
And that gives you kind of quite a lot of time to speak and get to know each other actually doing that for 2 years together.
And how does that translate into, how does the experience of working at a Burger King, flipping burgers, translate into running a massive, $2.25 billion valuation fintech startup?
Actually, it does. I mean, I think it's something to learn from like McDonald's and Burger King and like how they really make all these processes work, and it's like super efficient. And also like you can bring anyone like a young kid like myself on board, and you can like produce quite a right. I mean, I can barely cook, right? And you can still make me produce quite good food, just because you're following all these instructions that are quite straightforward. So it's quite interesting. There was a lot to learn there, but after a while, it did get a little bit boring to kind of do exactly the same thing all the time, right? So that's something that, there's no clear career path, really.
Well, we'll talk about evolution of career paths and evolution of companies in a second. First of all, I wanted a show of hands. How many of y'all know what Klarna does? Show of hands.
A few.
Wow.
That's
How
good.
many of y'all have actually bought something using the Klarna service? Anybody?
Oh my God, I think it's almost 3 hands. Four. I think it was
4 hands.
Yeah.
So explain a little bit about what it is that y'all are doing.
Cool. So, I mean, the really original idea and how we started was just like, why don't we let people pay after delivery? Because this whole payment thing is just so complex and takes a lot of time entering these credit card numbers and all that. And everybody's trying to think about how like you can make it even easier to enter your credit card number. So we just said, what if you don't enter it at all? Why don't you just let people buy, get the stuff, touch and feel it, and then pay for it? And that's like, we started with that first, and then we evolved it into what we today call Klarna Checkout, where we take like the full checkout of the e-commerce website and just makes it smoother, nicer, user-friendly.
And how does that lend itself to being a pretty profitable business, right? Y'all have been profitable since inception.
Yeah.
So where are the economics for you? What are you making money off of in that transaction?
Well, basically, if you think about the whole payments ecosystem, everybody's focused on the like what we call the gateway and the acquiring side of things, right? But the guys who really make money in that payments industry, it's the guys who issue your credit card, the bank who gives you that, right? So the difference with our model is that we offer a payment and gateway, acquiring business, and we can offer it to merchants. We can help them do that. But what's really interesting is we try to offer people an alternative to that credit card that they can, some of them start using, and then actually what usually the bank would make as profit on their customers, of the credit card customers, we will make instead. So that makes our revenue model very different.
Does that mean that you have to, in some ways, be a bank yourselves? Are y'all regulated like a bank here in Europe?
Yes, we actually have a bank license. We can run it through all of Europe.
Fascinating.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that easy to get and took some time to get there. And it's not the most fun thing, to be honest. But it does, I mean, it's pretty cool. Like a lot of people think that fintech disruption is all about technology, and it's of course extremely important. But what really adds a lot, if you have great, it sounds boring again, but if you have great compliance and legal people that understand privacy and all these things, that's where you can really make a difference.
Well, so it can be a process innovation rather than a technological innovation.
Yes.
One of the things that I find really sort of interesting about y'all's business and just sort of what's happening in fintech in general is that fintech seems to have been exploding in Europe. Jordan mentioned it in our introduction. What is it about the industry now that's making fintech so profitable for startups and such a ripe opportunity?
I think a lot of things. I think what's exciting in Europe as well is that, these have been like the banks are like really historical old banks in all these smaller countries, right? So there really has been no innovation at all for so many years. And now because the EU has opened up these markets, there's all these new companies coming in, and they're basically taking advantage of all this just poor competition that is in this marketplace and just creating new services on top of that, right? And I think the US has probably been a little bit more competitive, so the opportunities haven't been as great. while in Europe also there's been a strong history of fintech or technology here in London as well as in Stockholm and so forth. So I think that all these things add together. But Europe is really a great breeding ground for those services today.
So you mentioned the U.S. and y'all have just sort of launched your services in the U.S. as of what, November, early November, late?
Yeah, so we launched with Overstock.com and Shoes.com.
Right.
And I actually think, I'll be willing to, be a little bit gutsy and say that I think we're the fastest growing payment startup in the US ever. We're gonna, after 6 months after launching, we're about to hit like $1 billion in GMV run rate after 6 months. I think that's,
Jesus Christ.
I think that's quite uncommon actually. So it's really, really exciting for us.
Why, what's behind that growth in the US?
Well, I think here in Europe, we tend to look at the US and we're like, oh, it's so competitive and, there's such a lot of competition. It's really, really hard. But US people are just so much better at selling themselves and telling the great story about how fantastic everything is. I think it's quite ironic. I've never had an interview with somebody from the US that's been bad. They're always great. I want to hire each American that I have on an interview. They're so great at presenting themselves. While Europeans can be really sucky in an interview. They can be really you're not getting impressed at all.
I'm not sure I understand that. You have a point to that, right?
The point is that the American companies are so great at selling themselves and promoting themselves, but when you get into the market and you actually look at what you can do and how you can innovate and what your product can look at and what you can actually deliver, there is quite a lot of opportunity there as well. So
do you see companies like Affirm or some of the other very well-financed American startups that are operating in a similar buy now market, or even like Bill Me Later, which is the PayPal service that's been around forever, doing this one-click sort of buy?
Yeah, sure, but the big thing to us is there's a lot of one-click buy stuff out there, but then you kind of scratch the surface and it's always if you have registered here and you have done and that and so forth. What we wanted to do was what if we can do one click for every customer of that merchant, right? Independently of whether they used that merchant before, whether they know Klarna or whatever, it shouldn't matter. It should just be one click for everyone. That's when you're really going to get the maximum impact. But I also think, the other thing is today we're 1,200 people. We do $10 billion of GMV in total.
Jesus.
We have, done this for a long period of time in Europe and profitably so. So I think, and we have Sequoia and a lot of other, Michael Moritz, who was here before, is on our board and so forth. So we feel that we have the great backing to be really successful in the US as well.
At what point do you tackle public markets from a capital raising perspective, or just from liquidity? You've been profitable ever since your launch. You're growing rapidly in the US. Why not go public?
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit I've never been public, but it scares me a little bit to have to focus on quarterly returns and and all that stuff.
Have you ever missed a quarter internally?
Of course.
Why? Well,
because what you end up doing, I don't know how it is for other people that run companies, but I think with Klarna is that we really like doing long-term stuff. We really like doing investment and building great products. There's all this buzz going around, right? But building really great products, it takes a couple of years.
Yeah.
And if I would constantly be focusing on what I did just this quarter, I would just lose focus on that. That's what I'm worried about, at least. While to us being private, just the nice thing is that we have a long-term vision of where we're going, and we can just stick to that.
So what's next on the long-term vision? What's the next thing on the roadmap?
Lots of things. We definitely want to launch into more markets eventually, but there's also more products and services. But I'm super excited about how e-commerce is developing in general.
Okay, that's very general. You're very excited about products and services. What kinds of products and services are you most excited about going forward?
Couple of things. I think one thing that I'm really interested in e-commerce, for example, is a UK company here called Lyst. That Klarna has just started working with. And I think it's really exciting to see how you can use scraping technology and how you can use new tools to really kind of just disrupt the whole e-commerce industry. And that's something that excites me a lot. But I think when it comes to Klarna in general, specifically to us, over time, it's retail banking, right? That's the big thing that we want to disrupt. There's just so bad competition, a lot of old players that don't really have customers first, right?
But y'all seem to have backed into it in a really weird way. So when I think about the other companies that are trying to disrupt retail banking, especially in the States, a lot of them are approaching it from a lending perspective, right? That's the taste, right? You give someone some money, then they have to pay you back over time. You have this like buy now, pay in 14 days program. You're starting to get into lending in the US, right? But you seem to have taken the harder road.
Yeah.
So do you acquire into one of these lending businesses? Do you acquire into another ancillary market that would then lead you to be more hooky with
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think there's something. I think what's happened, if you look at like the whole retail banking in general,
Right.
is that the point is that the banks have been very local and they've been having like this massive amount of products. So it's all about selling 50, or hundreds of different products to the same customer, right? What we're seeing with internet is this is starting to change. We're seeing specialization increasing. So I'm not sure that you're going to have the same company helping you with a mortgage and a loan and and the payments aspect of things and so forth. I think more of it as like an open ecosystem where people will integrate to each other
Right.
and offering different solutions, but people are going to be extremely specialized. I don't believe in this general purpose banking that we've seen for such a long period of time. And I think there's a really interesting development in Europe where scraping has now been approved by the European
You're
lawmakers.
really into this scraping.
Yeah, I think but it's exciting because anyone today in this room can build an app on top of the data that the bank has already and improve that user experience, right? And there's a number of examples. We've seen Mint.com historically and others do that, but that creates such good potential to create disruption in this area.
So do you hook in with APIs, or do you actually roll up some of these things so that you can become at least underneath the platform through which all of this gets done?
I mean, I think over time there will be APIs because it just makes life a little bit easier.
Right.
But if you want to get pace, get going, you can scrape banks today, and you're
Right.
allowed to by the law.
Right.
They can't really prohibit you.
But
from
I
doing
mean, that's from sort of a more general strategy.
Yep.
I'm talking specifically with Klarna.
Yep.
Do you acquire to get into some of these ancillary markets, or do you just partner?
Well, I think to us, that specialization and focus is just so central. So like lending in the way you're thinking about it, like, the lending clubs of the world and so forth, that's actually to me a quite different business from what we do. And what I really want to target is like payments and kind of, being that general purpose vehicle for buying online. That's what I'm interested in. And we want to do that really, really, really well. And we want to do that globally.
Right.
So those things are not necessarily on our roadmap.
Speaking of globally, you talk about the opportunity in the U.S. and and the competition there. There are certain markets where the types of services that y'all are providing, letting people try before they buy, seem to be much more persuasive. And specifically emerging markets like China. Why did you not go to China first? Why did you go to the US first, which has a pretty well-established credit system? There's more lending, there are more opportunities. What's up with that?
I think, of all the markets that we've looked, the one we find the most competitive actually is China. And I think that Alipay is killing it.
Right.
And I don't really see a big opportunity there. I think they're doing great things and they're developing amazing financial services for their customers. It's not the most interesting market, to be honest. So there's a lot of others that I would be more interested in, but
like
China.
What?
Well, I think if you're talking about the developing countries, I would say India probably. I don't know if Brazil is called even a developing country anymore, but I would probably say. But then also, I'm super excited about Japan. I think that's a really interesting.
Really?
As well, yeah, of course.
Why?
Because it's one of those as well where competition hasn't really worked. There hasn't been that much innovation in fintech, and there's just like that creates more opportunity, right? The thing about developing, think about mobile payments. Where did that work first?
Right.
In Kenya, M-Pesa, right?
Yeah.
So like innovation in fintech is actually quite far advanced in most of the less developed countries,
right,
as opposed to the ones which are. So the opportunity is often where I think is actually in the developed world.
Now, if you were to look out and think about what's most interesting to you across the broad spectrum of fintech right now, what innovations seem to be most compelling? What would they be?
That's such a hard question to answer. I think I already said that with scraping.
Well, other than scraping. So let's put scraping aside.
I think scraping is cool. I think scraping is cool for one specific reason. A lot of people laugh at it, that it cannot scale, it cannot work. And actually, half of Klarna's volume, $5 billion a year, is running over a scraping system. So like you can make it scale. I think that's really, that to me, why I find that interesting is that you'll have like the small fintech startup that will be totally open to new technology.
Right.
And then you'll have the big banks who will never touch anything that feels kind of strange, right? And it's the land in between where Klarna is today, which excites me.
Right.
But I mean, apart from that, I just think, I mean, it's just going to be such a lot of fun in the next 10 years because the whole retail banking is just up for disruption. There's going to be a lot of change going on. So.
Who, to your mind, is, other than Klarna, of course, is sort of the biggest and best positioned fintech company right now?
Good question. I mean, I would say actually, you know, I think TransferWise this morning are really, really cool. I think they've done great.
Really, they're bigger and better positioned than PayPal, or bigger and better positioned than like Apple, or
Nah, maybe. I mean, I actually wanted to say PayPal as the next one. I think PayPal has a great position. The question is what they're going to do with it, right?
Right.
And the way they're going to be able to do something with it. I think Apple will see a little bit how it develops. I mean, actually, when Apple Pay was launched, I was more interested by the fact that they launched this SIM card that allows you to, in the software, change carriers. Because suddenly you take like the switching cost between carriers away totally, and you know you make the carrier into a real dumb pipe, right? So that was more interesting to me. The question is Apple Pay eventually going to be the same thing? Are you actually even going to care which card you have loaded into Apple Pay?
Right.
That's the question, right? Because if you don't, the bank is becoming the next dumb pipe.
Right. Well, what's interesting to me about that, and I've always thought that Venmo was really well positioned to do that for PayPal, to sort of obviate the need for going through a traditional banking system. But set that aside. So if PayPal would be other than TransferWise, which is, I guess I'll go with you on that one, the best positioned company, who's the worst positioned company in fintech right now?
Well, you know, if you're running more than 90% of your stuff on Cobalt, then you are probably pretty well bad position, right? So that would be everyone in the banking industry.
Ah, I see. Way to turn that question around for me, sir. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of role playing with the last couple of minutes, and not in a freaky way. If you were the CEO of PayPal right now, what would you do? What would be your next strategic step to sort of take advantage of this dominance that you have in the market?
It sounds horrible, but I would probably buy Klarna, actually. Did I say that? Are you allowed to say that? I don't know.
Yeah,
Like, I think we have a lot of good stuff, like, but not that I want to be acquired.
How much would they have to buy it for?
I don't know. A lot.
Well, what's a lot?
I don't know. I mean, it's just like...
If you're valued at 2.25 right now,
Yeah.
what would you sell for?
Yeah, I don't know.
7 billion?
No, but it's like... I don't really like... I love what I'm doing. I just would like to continue doing it. If I may.
You wouldn't mind doing it?
If I may.
But you wouldn't mind doing it as a vice president under the thumb of some jackass American CEO?
Well, if you present it that way, it sounds really attractive, actually.
Yeah, well,
but,
I try.
You know, to be honest, like, I don't know. What I'm really here for is impact, right? I think the more people use our services, the more attractive it becomes. So in a way, I'm not like, it wouldn't be totally unthinkable for me at some distant future to not be an entrepreneur, but actually work for somebody else if I could have impact with our products and affect people's lives. But with that said, I have no current, interest in doing so. I find what we're doing really cool, and I think Klarna is extremely well positioned to, be much larger than PayPal has ever been.
All right, I'm probably going to walk into the same answer, but I'm going to ask this question again. If you are the CEO of Morgan Stanley right now,
Right.
What do you do to not be Morgan Stanley? Like,
I have no
how do you get out of the rut that you're in using these legacy systems? Do you also buy
Morgan
Klarna?
Stanley is a bad example because it's more like investment bankers than retail, right? So if I'm like...
Bank of America.
Bank of America, thank you. You know what I would do? I know exactly what I would do, actually. I would either acquire something, like some of these banks acquired Simple.com. I can't remember which one of those.
BBVA.
Yeah, I mean,
European bank, yeah.
That's really a cheap acquisition, to be honest, because like for that bank to try to build that in-house themselves would have been like 10 times as expensive as buying them. But what I would probably do is to try to isolate a small startup team internally that I really had faith in, but it would have to be people that really know the business as well, so they do understand all the challenges and like how to do it in a scalable way. And I would like put them in a different place and then allow them to like build it from scratch and really like push them on to innovate and eventually just replace whatever we had.
Well, and I think with that, we're almost at, I'd like to say it's a real pleasure, and I know we've given people a lot of fat to chew on about what's going on in the fintech market right now. So with that, I'll say thank you so much for paying attention and listening. I hope
you.
it was informative.
Thank
Y'all
you.
have a good one. Cheers.